The first photograph on the ballroom screens showed my wife in her wedding dress. The second showed the same photograph after someone had removed me. I am Noah Calloway, the conservator restoring the Carrow Grand Hotel. Juliet Carrow is the hotel's CEO, its heiress, and for 11 quiet months my wife. Her father, Edmund Carrow, chaired the centennial gala. He stood beneath 30 feet of my missing body and called the cropped image a portrait of an unencumbered leader. Nobody in the ballroom knew we were married. Juliet did not look at her father. She looked across 6 tables at me. I had brought the original photograph because she had asked me to. It rested inside a narrow walnut frame against my chair, wrapped in the linen sleeve my mother had sewn for it. In the real image, Juliet and I stood beneath rain-dark plane trees outside a county courthouse. Her forehead touched mine. My hand covered hers. The version above Edmund's shoulder preserved the wet leaves, the white dress, even the half-laugh on Juliet's mouth. It simply ended where my shoulder should have begun. Edmund continued speaking about succession, discipline, and the kind of sacrifice required to keep a family institution intact. The room held lenders, hotel managers, longtime employees, and enough cameras to turn a private lie into the official history before dessert. Juliet crossed to the stage. Her father lowered the microphone. Not yet. She took it from him anyway. "Stop the presentation," she said. The screens went black, but not fast enough to make me forget the clean vertical edge where I had been cut away. Juliet stepped down from the stage and came toward me. Guests shifted to see whether she was greeting a contractor or removing a problem. She stopped beside my chair and placed one hand on the linen sleeve. "May I?" It would have been easy to make her ask twice. I opened the sleeve and gave her the frame. She carried it to the stage without explaining me. That mattered. If she had begun with a speech, Edmund could have called it emotion. Instead, she set the photograph under the document camera used for old hotel plans. A technician hesitated at the control desk. Juliet turned so he could see her face. Every screen errant now. The original appeared above us. Juliet and me, wet from the rain, married and unmistakably happy. A murmur moved through the ballroom. It was not one sound. It was surprise near the press tables, recognition among staff who had seen us arrive separately too many times, and the sharp silence of directors calculating what an undisclosed marriage to a contractor might mean. Juliet faced the room. "The man beside me in that photograph is Noah Calloway. He is my husband. The image you were shown removed him. I did not authorize that use, and I will not allow it to stand as our history." She did not say she had never authorized a crop. At the time, I heard only the word husband. Edmund reached the microphone first. "This is neither the place nor the method for a vendor disclosure. You made it the place when you put our wedding on the wall." He looked at me then, not with surprise, but with the cold disappointment of a man whose private warning had refused to remain private. "Mr. Calloway knows why discretion was necessary." I stood. "I know why we chose it. I don't know why you chose to lie." The cameras pivoted. Until that moment, the room had treated me as evidence in someone else's dispute. My voice made me a participant, and I saw Juliet flinch because she knew the question was addressed to more than her father. Edmund asked the technicians to turn off the screens. Nobody moved. A woman rose from the director's table before the stalemate could become theater. Juliet introduced her immediately. "Marin Pike is our general counsel," she told the room. "She will advise the board on the disclosure and the restoration contract." Marin was 43, compact and composed, with a gray folder already under one arm. I had met her twice during contracting, always with 3 other people present. She did not look delighted to become part of a family confession, but she did not pretend the problem was only personal. "The board should not improvise a review in front of guests," Marin said. "The centennial program ends here. Directors will meet Monday at 9. Until then, no one alters contract files, communications records, or the presentation archive." "The hotel opens tomorrow," Edmund said. "We do not cancel a centennial because my daughter has confused disclosure with spectacle." Juliet kept the original photograph beneath the camera. "The hotel will open. The fiction will not continue." The orchestra had stopped. Servers stood with silver coffee pots suspended above cups. At table 12, Theo Bennett, the hotel's 52-year-old facilities director, watched me with the alarm of a man who knew that 60 restoration workers were due back at 7 the next morning. Theo had worked at the Grand for 26 years. He had argued for saving the old ballroom ceiling when Edmund wanted a cheaper replacement, and he had been the first person at Carrow Hotels to judge my work rather than my last name. I went to him before I went to my wife. "The East Wing stabilization continues," I said. "No one loses a shift because of this. Can you promise that?" "I can promise my crew reports. I can't promise the board lets us through the door." Juliet heard me. She turned to Marin. "Issue written access for the safety work already scheduled. No new variations, no discretionary approvals, and I recuse myself from all of it until the board decides." Marin nodded once. The decision was neither romantic nor complete, but it kept people from paying for a lie they had not created. Edmund descended from the stage. His expression stayed mild for the cameras. "You have given the board 2 problems instead of 1, he told Juliet. "An undisclosed spouse and a public admission that the spouse holds a major contract. Noah won that contract before we married, and every change order after the ceremony will now be examined, as if he won you first." The cruelty landed because it carried a legitimate question inside it. My firm had won the first phase through a blind review. Then the hotel walls had revealed more water damage than the survey showed. There were later approvals, added crews, and expensive decisions made while Juliet and I went home to the same apartment and arrived at work in separate cars. I had insisted the secrecy protected my independence. Hearing Edmund describe it, I saw how perfectly secrecy also protected his control. Guests began leaving beneath our wedding photograph. Some looked at Juliet with admiration. Others looked at me with the curiosity reserved for a man who might be either humiliated or very rich by morning. Juliet lifted the frame from beneath the camera and brought it back to me. "I didn't know he was using it," she said. "Using what? The photograph or the crop?" Her fingers tightened against the walnut edge. That was my answer before she spoke. "There was an earlier crop," she said. "I approved it 6 months ago." Around us, the ballroom screen still showed the original. In her hands, the frame suddenly felt like a door I had been standing behind while telling myself I was outside by choice. We left the ballroom through the service corridor, because the lobby was full of cameras. Juliet walked ahead of me with our wedding photograph held against her ribs. The hotel staff flattened themselves politely along the walls, pretending not to notice their CEO carrying proof that she had a husband. I had spent 8 months restoring those corridors. I knew where the plaster was original, where old fire doors had been sealed, and where a narrow staircase led to the unfinished bridal suite on the 5th floor. Juliet knew it too. She opened that door without asking whether I would follow. The suite had no furniture. Work lights threw white circles across covered floors. Beyond the windows, the city looked clean and distant. She set the frame on a crate between us. "The profile ran in February," she said. "The business magazine wanted a photograph from somewhere personal. Communications found the wedding image in my private media folder. I told them they could use a version with only me." "Why was our wedding in a company folder?" "Because I sent it to myself at work when your mother asked which print we wanted. It was ordinary enough to be believable. That hurt more than a complicated conspiracy would have." "Did you tell the editor you were married?" "No." "Did you tell me they cropped it?" "No." She did not decorate either answer. Juliet and I had married on a wet Tuesday with my mother and a courthouse clerk as witnesses. The secrecy had begun as mine. When the first rumors about us reached Edmund, he accused me of courting a client. I told Juliet I would not have anyone say I married into a contract. We agreed to wait until the first restoration phase closed. Then the east wall opened and revealed another year of work. Juliet said a disclosure during refinancing would look engineered. I agreed to wait until the centennial. When the centennial approached, Edmund said the board was preparing to confirm her as permanent chief executive, and a private marriage to a vendor would become the story. Juliet asked for 1 more month. Each delay had sounded temporary. Together they made a life. I approved the profile crop because the article was about the hotel, she said. I told myself you had chosen privacy, so protecting it was respectful. You protected my privacy by showing your wedding dress and removing the groom. She closed her eyes for a moment. Yes, the absence of an argument left nowhere for my anger to spend itself. Did your father know about that crop? He reviewed the profile, he praised it, and tonight he used the same file. I think so. I looked at the original. My mother, Ruth, had taken it after the courthouse ceremony. She was a retired wedding photographer who distrusted posed happiness. She caught us between photographs, rain on Juliet's lashes and both of us laughing because the wind had turned my umbrella inside out. Ruth printed one copy. She penciled the date on the brown paper backing and told us that a marriage deserved at least one object nobody could revise with a swipe. We had laughed at the severity of that sentence. Juliet touched the frame, then pulled her hand away before it reached mine. I did not know about tonight, she said, but I gave him a version of me without you and showed him I would tolerate it. You didn't give it to him. You approved it for yourself. That isn't better. No, it was more honest. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and told me who was calling before she answered. It's Marin. She is the only lawyer advising the board, and I asked her to preserve the presentation records. Juliet put the call on speaker. Marin said the gala deck had been assembled through Edmund's office. The image file was the February profile crop. 2 days earlier, Edmund had approved a caption describing Juliet as having devoted her adult life exclusively to the company. The caption had never appeared because Juliet stopped the presentation before the next slide. Was he going to say she was unmarried? I asked. Not in those words, Marin said. The implication was clear enough. Why? Marin paused. A lender representative was present. So were 3 directors who oppose confirming Juliet while the vendor conflict is unresolved. Mr. Carrow appears to have chosen a succession narrative that removed the conflict by removing the marriage. Juliet's face went still. Did he alter any contract record? I have no indication of that. Noah's original award predates the marriage by 14 months. The later variation orders are the issue. You signed none, but your officers report to you. The process may be clean. Concealment makes it harder to prove. Juliet thanked her and ended the call. That's the part he will keep saying, I told her, and he'll be right about it. About the concealment, yes, not the erasure. The erasure worked because we concealed it first. She looked at me across the crate. You keep saying we, because I asked for secrecy at the beginning, and I kept extending it after the reason changed. I let you. You shouldn't have had to force your wife to acknowledge you, and you shouldn't have had to drag a husband into the light when he kept proving his pride by staying out of it. That was the argument neither of us had wanted. It did not have a villain large enough to spare us from ourselves. We went home separately. Juliet returned to the apartment first because I stayed to check the East Wing access list with Theo. When I arrived after midnight, she had placed the wedding photograph on the dining table. Our apartment belonged to neither family. We had rented it under both names, but we lived there like people avoiding evidence. Her formal shoes were in a cloth bag. My restoration samples filled the sideboard. No photograph of us stood anywhere visible from the front door. Juliet had opened a folder on her laptop. She turned it toward me. It contained the original blind bid score from before our marriage, the signed award, and every later variation request. Nothing had appeared from nowhere. They were the records Marin had ordered preserved. I recognized Theo's approvals and the finance signatures. Juliet's name appeared only in meeting distribution lists. This may clear the procedure, she said. It does not clear us. I sat opposite her. What happens Monday? The board can suspend me while it reviews the disclosure. It can freeze your work beyond immediate safety items. My father can argue that tonight proves I put a personal relationship above the company. Did you? I stopped him from lying about my marriage. If that is against the company's interest, the company has been built around the wrong interest. It sounded brave. It also sounded like something said after the cost had become unavoidable. I pointed to the laptop. What did you plan to do before the screen changed? Juliet looked toward the dark window. After the gala, I was going to ask you for another 6 weeks. The honesty took the air out of the room. For the refinancing, for the board vote, for the contract closeout, for whatever came next. I had not yet chosen the sentence that would make it sound temporary. I stood and took my overnight bag from the hall cupboard. She did not ask whether I was leaving the marriage. That question would have been another demand for certainty she had not offered. I need somewhere tonight where I am not a disclosure problem, I said. Where will you go? My workshop. I lifted the wedding photograph from the table. Then I stopped. The original belonged to both of us. Taking it would turn the truest image we had into possession. I left it standing between our 2 empty chairs. At 7 Sunday morning, my crew entered the Carrow Grand through the loading dock under a written safety authorization. Theo Bennett met us beside the freight elevator. He had already marked the permitted work in blue pencil, shore the east arch, seal the exposed masonry, and leave every cosmetic task untouched. Nobody mentioned the gala until the elevator doors closed. My wife saw the photograph online, Theo said. She wants to know whether she has to pretend she never met yours. Tell her Juliet exists. Beyond that, I don't know. Theo watched the floor numbers. You know the board may stop the job tomorrow. I know. 41 of your people are on this phase. 19 hotel trades depend on your schedule. I know that too. He unfolded the access sheet. Then don't resign in a way that makes you feel clean and leaves them unemployed. It was the least flattering good advice I received all weekend. I spent the morning beneath the east arch, where removing painted plaster had exposed a crack through 3 courses of 19th century brick. Restoration is often described as saving beautiful things. Most days it is less romantic. You find where someone hid damage, make the structure carry its honest weight, and accept that the repair will remain visible to anyone who knows where to look. At 10, Theo brought Edmund into the work zone. He introduced him to the crew as the board chair before Edmund did anything consequential, though everyone recognized him from the company portraits. Edmund wore a dark overcoat over last night's formal trousers. He stopped outside the taped line and put on the hard hat Theo offered. 5 minutes, Theo told him. No instructions to the crew. Edmund accepted the limit because challenging a facilities director in front of tradespeople would have made him look smaller than he intended. He and I spoke in an empty guest room with the door open. Through it, I could see the framed original Juliet had brought from our apartment. She had placed it on a folding table beside Marin's sealed copy of the gala archive, then gone upstairs to meet hotel managers. The image did not accuse anyone. That made it harder to avoid. Juliet said you wanted it preserved with the records, Edmund said. She did. You left your home last night. That is not a board matter. It became one when my daughter chose your domestic argument as the centennial program. I stepped between him and the photograph. You chose the program. I chose a truthful description of her professional life. You used her wedding dress. A dress does not create a disclosure. A husband with a $28 million restoration contract does. The number was the full multi-year ceiling, not what my company had been paid. Edmund knew that. He also knew cameras would repeat the larger figure. Why didn't you challenge the contract when you learned we married? Because the first award was defensible, and because Juliet asked for time to separate the later work cleanly. She kept asking for time. So did you. There it was again. A legitimate concern placed like a polished rail around an ugly act. You could have demanded disclosure and forced my daughter to announce that she had secretly married a vendor while seeking permanent confirmation as chief executive. I gave her the opportunity to resolve it privately, by pretending she was alone, by presenting the role she actually chose in public. I almost struck him. He saw it and did not retreat. Then I looked through the doorway at the original photograph. My anger was not evidence of courage. For 11 months I had entered this hotel through service doors and left Juliet to stand alone at every public event. Edmund had exploited that arrangement, but he had not invented it. You thought the image would help the board confirm her, I said. The refinancing closes when leadership is stable. The board will not consider a hidden vendor marriage stable. If the lender delays, this hotel loses the capital to finish the East Wing, and 300 seasonal positions disappear before Christmas. He was not protecting only a surname. He was protecting jobs, financing, and a succession he believed only he could control. The people were real. His conclusion was not. So you removed the husband and kept the contractor. I expected the contract to close before the marriage became relevant. People do not become relevant on your schedule. Edmund's gaze moved to the folding table. You think the uncropped photograph proved something last night. It proved my daughter can be provoked into risking a hotel for a man who insists he does not need her. I needed her to tell the truth. You needed her to perform it after accepting the opposite for nearly a year. That was the sentence I carried back under the arch. At noon, Juliet came down without an assistant. She had changed into a plain navy suit and tied her hair back. The photograph remained on the table between us. Marin found the February approval, she said. My approval. The crop file used last night is identical. Your father admitted he used it to protect the financing and your confirmation. He told me the same. He also offered a solution. What does it cost? I issue a statement saying I acted without full information when I stopped the gala. The company discloses that we married after your initial award. You complete the current phase and waive the remaining options. I stay CEO, the financing proceeds, and he remains chair. And the photograph, we call its use a presentation error. Was it? No. One of my masons started a drill in the next room. The vibration traveled through the floor into the legs of the folding table. Juliet steadied the frame before it fell. If you refuse, I said, what happens to the hotel? The lender can pause, not cancel automatically pause. Edmund keeps using the most frightening number because frightened people stop asking who benefits from haste. Marin believes the board can appoint an interim procurement monitor and preserve the work, but the directors have to choose it. And what happens to you? Temporary suspension is possible. Removal is possible. Do you want me to tell you to take his offer? No. Do you want me to tell you to refuse it for me? She looked directly at me. No. I want to stop making you the reason for choices I should be able to defend without you. That was different from the ballroom speech. It did not ask an audience to reward her. I took the restoration schedule from Theo's desk and spread it beside the photograph. 6 weeks of structural work remained. After that came decorative packages my firm could surrender without leaving the building unsafe. I will complete the structural closeout if an outside monitor approves every invoice, I said. Then Callaway Conservation withdraws from every future Carrow bid for 3 years. No payout for the canceled options. No private settlement. Juliet studied the schedule. That protects the hotel and makes you pay for our concealment. It makes my company lose work we should never have pursued while the marriage was hidden. The later packages were competitively priced. That is not the only thing trust measures. She pressed her palm against the table. If you do this because my father cropped you out, I am doing it because I stayed cropped out and kept sending invoices into the same building. The distinction hurt both of us. Juliet asked Theo to join us. Before she gave any instruction, she introduced the proposal and asked what the workers needed. Theo said 6 weeks, guaranteed access and written authority that could not disappear with a family argument. He did not care which Carrow signed it. Juliet called Marin and requested those terms for Monday's board packet. Then she called Edmund. I am rejecting your statement, she said. Tomorrow the board gets the original photograph, the approved crop, the full contract timeline and Noah's closeout proposal. You may explain your own presentation. When she ended the call, neither of us felt victorious. The original photograph stood beside the work schedule. One object showing the marriage we had hidden, the other showing the cost of finally naming it. Monday's board meeting began with the wedding photograph face down. Marin Pike had placed it at the center of the long table and covered the screens. She introduced herself as counsel conducting the meeting, stated that she did not represent any member of the Carrow family personally, and identified the decisions required. Juliet's disclosure, Edmund's use of company communications, the restoration contract, and continuity of hotel work. No journalists waited outside. No orchestra played. 12 directors sat with coffee and paper copies of records that had existed before the gala. The absence of an audience made every answer more expensive. I attended for the contract portion only. Juliet sat opposite me, not beside her father. Edmund had the February profile approval open in front of him. Marin asked him why he had used the crop. The centennial presentation concerned Juliet's leadership, he said. Her private spouse was not relevant. Then why use a wedding image at all? For the first time, Edmund looked at the face-down frame. Because it was the strongest available portrait. That is not accurate, Marin said. Your office rejected 9 executive portraits. In an email on Thursday, you wrote that the wedding crop made Ms. Carrow appear to have chosen the hotel above a personal life. The email was not a surprise document. Marin had described the preserved presentation archive on Saturday. Its importance came from hearing Edmund on the sentence. He did not deny it. The board was voting on her commitment. Juliet spoke before anyone could turn commitment into a measure. Only she had to satisfy. I approved that crop in February. My father reused it, but I taught this company that removing my husband was acceptable if the publication was flattering enough. I concealed my marriage after the reason for privacy had expired. That failure is mine. A director asked whether she had influenced my contract. No, Juliet said. The first award predates our marriage. I signed no variation order. That does not erase the appearance created by concealment. I am recusing myself from this review and from any vendor decision involving Noah or his firm. Marin turned to me. I explained the blind bid, the discoveries inside the east wall, and the added work. I kept it shorter than Edmund expected. The board did not need a lecture on lime mortar. It needed to know whether the building and its workers could be protected without rewarding me for our silence. My proposal is in your packet, I said. Callaway Conservation completes 6 weeks of structural closeout under a monitor selected by directors with no Carrow family ties. We waive the decorative options and do not bid on Carrow work for 3 years. I receive payment only for verified work. You are surrendering profitable contracts, one director said. Yes. Is Juliet asking you to do that? No. I am separating my marriage from my customer after failing to do it sooner. Edmund leaned back. A noble answer after a very public humiliation. Not noble late. The word unsettled him, because it denied him the fight he wanted. Theo joined by invitation before the board discussed access. Marin introduced him as the Grand's facilities director and the employee responsible for building safety. Theo confirmed that stopping immediately would expose the arch and displace crews. 6 supervised weeks would make the East Wing stable. He supported open rebidding after closeout. Once he finished, Marin dismissed both of us. Juliet did not ask me to wait outside for her. I returned to my workshop and found my mother sitting on the loading step with 2 coffees. Ruth Callaway was 68, retired from wedding photography, and incapable of pretending she had come by accident. Juliet had called her Sunday night to admit what had happened to the photograph. Ruth listened without comforting either of us, then drove 3 hours that morning. Where is the print? She asked. Boardroom. Good, it was getting too peaceful on your wall. I sat beside her. She did not ask whether Juliet loved me. She asked why I had agreed to disappear. I thought privacy proved I wasn't using her. To whom? Her father, the board, everyone. And did they believe you? No. Then perhaps the proof was for you. I peeled the lid from my coffee. Juliet kept extending it. Yes, that is her failure. Do not polish yours until it looks like sacrifice. Ruth had spent 30 years watching couples pose around resentments they would not name. She knew how a person could make silence look dignified. My phone rang at 11:40. Juliet told me the board had voted. She would remain CEO during a 6-week governance review, but she lost unilateral control over communications and procurement. An independent director would approve vendor matters. The refinancing would proceed only after the lender received the full disclosure, not Edmund's preferred statement. Edmund was removed as chair pending a shareholder vote and barred from directing company communications immediately. He kept his board seat and his shares. The decision punished the authority he misused, without inventing a clean exile. The board accepted my closeout proposal. "Are you safe?" I asked. "Professionally, for 6 weeks conditionally. Personally, I don't know what safe means anymore." "Where are you?" "Still in the boardroom. Everyone left." "And the photograph?" "In front of me." I drove to the hotel. Juliet stood alone by the window when I entered. The frame lay face up now. The ballroom screens had made our wedding enormous. The boardroom made it look small enough to break. "My father says I traded the company for a photograph," she said. "Did you?" "No. I traded his version of the company for a review I should have ordered months ago." "And us?" She did not reach for my hand. "I don't want the screen reveal to buy forgiveness," she said. "I don't want losing authority to become a performance you have to reward." "Good, because I am still angry." "You should be." "I am also tired of using anger to avoid saying what I want." She waited. "I want a marriage people can know exists," I said. "I want separate work, a home no Carrow office can enter, and no decision about us postponed because the next quarter looks inconvenient. I want to know whether you choose those things when there is no ballroom watching." Juliet looked at the original photograph for a long time. "I do," she said, "but saying it today would be another picture. I need to live it long enough that you can tell the difference." We did not reconcile in the boardroom. We carried the photograph downstairs together. At the lobby, 3 cameras waited behind the brass rail. Juliet stopped before we reached them. "Do you want to walk out beside me?" she asked. It was the first public choice she offered instead of making for me. "Not today," I said. "Today you explain your company. I will explain myself when I am ready." She nodded and went through the doors alone, not because I had been removed, but because I had chosen my own position. I left through the main entrance 5 minutes later, carrying the uncropped photograph, where anyone could see it. For 6 weeks, Juliet and I lived in 2 places and stopped pretending distance was the same as an ending. I slept in the room above my workshop. She remained in the apartment until the lease ended. We met every Wednesday at a small diner that had never hosted a Carrow event. We discussed the marriage before the company, and if one of us used the word temporary, the other asked for a date. The first Wednesday, Juliet brought a list of every place the company described her as unmarried, unattached, or exclusively devoted to the hotel. She had ordered factual corrections without adding photographs of us. "I won't turn you into a new campaign," she said. "Good, I don't need a husband page on the website." There was a proposal for one. Of course there was. She almost smiled. The moment did not fix anything, but it belonged to us rather than an audience. The second Wednesday, I admitted I had rejected 3 invitations to attend hotel events with her before Edmund ever requested secrecy. I had feared looking ornamental beside a wealthy wife. Juliet had interpreted each refusal as relief. "I should have asked why," she said. "I should have answered the question you never asked." The third Wednesday, she showed me a lease application for a modest townhouse halfway between her office and my workshop. Both names were on it. She had not signed. "I want a home with you," she said. "I am asking before I choose it." We visited on Saturday. It had uneven floors, a narrow kitchen, and no concierge who reported to her father. I signed only after we argued about the commute, and the rent like 2 adults planning an ordinary life. At the hotel, the outside monitor reviewed every invoice. The process found 2 estimating errors, both in the hotel's favor, and 1 approval that should have been documented more clearly. It found no direction from Juliet and no inflated charge from my firm. The clean result did not return the decorative options. I had surrendered them because procedure was only part of the damage. Theo kept the closeout moving. On the final morning, the temporary supports came down from the east arch. The original brick held. The repair line remained visible under the new finish, a pale seam curving above the corridor. Some owners would ask us to hide that, Theo said. Some owners crop photographs. He gave me a look. You have used that joke once. Retire it before it becomes a personality. I laughed for the first time inside the Grand since the gala. Edmund arrived before the safety walk. He no longer had an assistant carrying his papers. The shareholder vote had removed him as chair the previous week, though he retained one board seat. A retired operations executive, Margaret Hale, had been elected chair after being introduced to shareholders through the formal process. She never entered our personal story or made a surprise rescue. Her role was structural. No member of the Carrow family would control communications, procurement, and the board agenda at once again. Edmund asked to speak with me in the restored corridor. Theo stayed within sight. The lender closed, Edmund said. The hotel retained the capital. Juliet kept her position. Your work passed review. Everyone appears satisfied. Do you? Satisfaction is not a governance measure. Neither is pretending your daughter has no husband. His mouth tightened. You want an apology. I wanted one when you thought your apology could still change my decision. Now I want you to understand the boundary. You do not speak for my marriage. You do not use our images. You do not send messages through Juliet about my work. If you have a board question, use the board process. If you have a family question, ask us and accept that we may say no. And if I refuse, then you will know why our front door stays closed. Edmund looked up at the repaired arch. My objection to the contract was not imaginary. No, your solution was dishonest. Those can both be true. For once, he did not try to exchange a partial truth for absolution. I should have required disclosure, he said. I should not have used the photograph. It was not warm. It was also the first sentence from him that did not relocate responsibility. You should tell Juliet. She has declined to meet me privately. Then respect the decline. He left before the safety walk. Juliet arrived 10 minutes later with Marin and 2 directors. She did not ask what her father had said until the professional inspection ended and Thea signed the closeout sheet. Only then did we step into the empty ballroom. The screens were dark. The stage where she had revealed our marriage had been cleared for another event. Without guests, the room was smaller than I remembered. Juliet carried the walnut frame. It had remained locked in Marin's evidence cabinet during the review. The company had retained digital copies of both files. The physical original was ours again. Where should it go? She asked. 6 weeks earlier, I might have answered our home as if location could settle the meaning. Instead, I unhooked the frame backing. My mother's penciled date still crossed the brown paper in soft gray. Nothing else was hidden there. No deed, no signature, no convenient proof. Just the day 2 people had married and believed privacy would remain theirs to control. Not your office, I said. Agreed. Not mine either. Agreed. The townhouse if we both move in. Juliet looked at me. Are you ready to? I am ready to try living there. I am not ready to call the last 6 weeks a completed repair. Neither am I. We walked from the ballroom to the main lobby side by side. Staff noticed. Nobody applauded. That helped. Outside, Juliet paused beneath the hotel canopy. The company statement goes out this afternoon, she said. It names you as my husband, explains the contract timeline, my recusal, the review findings, and the procurement changes. Marin cut every sentence that tried to describe our relationship beyond those facts. Will your father approve it? He no longer approves company statements. That was the practical difference between a public gesture and a change structure. We moved into the townhouse the next weekend. Juliet brought 2 suitcases, 3 boxes of books, and no staff. I brought too many lamps and a work table that barely fit through the door. We hung the wedding photograph in the upstairs hallway, not above the fireplace. Visitors could see it if they came into our home. It was not visible from the street, a press camera, or a corporate lobby. On our first night there, Juliet stood beneath it and asked whether I regretted marrying her. No, I said. I regret how long we treated the marriage as something that could wait outside the room. I am sorry I approved the crop. I know. That is not the same as forgiveness. No. Are we still choosing this? I looked around the half-unpacked hallway. There was no audience, no board packet, and no deadline except the one we might invent to avoid an answer. Yes, I said, with the boundaries we named, with separate work, with no hidden extensions. And if either of us begins disappearing to make the other comfortable, we say it before someone else notices the empty space. Juliet took my hand. Yes, she said. That was not a renewal ceremony. It was better. It was a decision made in a narrow hallway while the dinner delivery went cold downstairs. 4 months after the gala, the Carrow Grand held an anniversary breakfast for employees who had worked through the restoration. I attended as the outgoing conservator, not the CEO's hidden husband and not a future bidder. My firm's final payment had cleared. The decorative work had gone through an open competition to another company. All 60 people attached to the structural phase finished their scheduled employment, and Theo hired 6 of the apprentices into the hotel's permanent maintenance team. Juliet remained chief executive after the governance review. The board confirmed her by a vote that did not depend on calling her unattached. Her recusal from any matter involving my firm remained in force until the 3-year separation ended, whether or not I ever bid again. Company communications reported through the new chair and a committee, not through Edmund. The lender closed the centennial financing after receiving the real disclosure. No miracle investor appeared. The hotel continued because people accepted slower, more honest work. Edmund kept his board seat and lost the ability to turn it into family authority. He had not visited our townhouse. He sent one written request for dinner. Juliet answered that we would consider it after the holidays together. He did not arrive uninvited. The marriage was less photogenic than the gala made it look. Juliet still tried to solve discomfort by organizing it. I still withdrew when I feared appearing dependent. In October, I accepted a museum project 2 cities away without discussing the travel schedule. She found out when my project manager copied her by mistake. We argued in the kitchen, apologized without witnesses, and changed the calendar together. Progress did not mean our flaws became symbolic and polite. The wedding photograph remained in the upstairs hallway. Some mornings I passed it without looking. Other mornings I saw the rain on Juliet's lashes and remembered how young our certainty had been. We never posted it online. The company never used it again. At the breakfast, the ballroom screens showed photographs of bricklayers, housekeepers, electricians, servers, and apprentices. None had been taken from private folders. Each person had approved the image in which they appeared. Juliet had insisted on that rule, then asked the communications committee to write it so it would outlast her. Theo stood on stage and described the restoration in 2 minutes. He thanked crews instead of executives. When he named Callaway Conservation, I joined my team near the front. Juliet remained beside the hotel managers at the other end of the stage. That distance was accurate. We had done different work. After breakfast, a photographer arranged everyone beneath the restored East Arch. She was a young hotel employee named Lena Ortiz, introduced by Theo as the staff archivist responsible for the anniversary record. Her role was only to take the picture. She held no surprise authority and settled no conflict. The group was too wide for the lens. Lena moved managers toward the back and tradespeople toward the center. I stepped down after checking that my apprentices were visible. "Mr. Callaway, just outside the column, please," she said. "We can put the contractors on the edge." It was a practical instruction, not an insult. I started toward the column. Juliet saw me move. She did not stop the room. She did not take a microphone. She asked Lena how much space the frame allowed. "If we lose the 2 empty chairs and bring everyone closer enough," Lena said. Juliet lifted the chairs herself. Theo took one from her and carried it aside. Then Juliet moved from the executives and stood beside me among the apprentices. "You should be with the hotel team," I said quietly. "I am." She left enough space that I could choose whether to close it. I stepped nearer. Lena checked the viewfinder. "That holds everyone." Nobody shouted about cropping. Nobody pointed to a screen. The shutter clicked while Theo was still trying not to smile. The anniversary photograph appeared a week later in the staff corridor, not the public lobby. I was in it. Juliet was in it. So were the workers who had carried the building through a family crisis that should never have threatened their wages. My presence did not erase theirs, and Juliet's choice did not make the image only about us. That evening, my mother came to the townhouse for dinner. Ruth stood beneath the wedding photograph with her glasses low on her nose. "The frame is crooked," she said. "The floor is crooked," I told her. A conservator blaming the building. How convenient. Juliet brought the new staff photograph from the kitchen. Lena had given each participant a small print. Ruth compared the two images, the wet courthouse trees, then the crowded hotel arch. "This one is badly composed," she said of the staff picture. "Far too many honest faces." Juliet laughed. She no longer looked toward me before doing it, as if checking whether happiness would be misread. Ruth placed the staff print on the hallway table rather than hanging it. Not every photograph needs to become a monument. After dinner, Juliet and I walked my mother to her car. No hotel driver waited. No assistant opened the door. Ruth hugged Juliet, then me, and warned us that she would take a better photograph at Christmas whether we approved or not. When we returned inside, Juliet stopped at the table. "Do you want the staff picture upstairs?" she asked. "Here is fine." "Do you want the wedding picture downstairs?" I considered it. The original had survived being hidden, enlarged, weaponized, preserved as evidence, and finally returned. Moving it into the living room would not prove we were less afraid. Leaving it upstairs no longer meant shame. "No," I said, "it belongs where we put it." Juliet adjusted the frame by half an inch. It remained crooked because the floor really was. "My father asked again about dinner," she said. "What do you want?" "January, a restaurant, 2 hours. No company agenda. If he crosses the boundary, we leave together." "Then January." She studied my face. "You aren't agreeing because you think I need permission." "No, I am agreeing because you told me the terms and asked what I wanted." The difference sounded small. Our marriage had nearly disappeared inside small differences we refused to name. We went downstairs. Juliet turned off the hallway light, leaving the wedding photograph in the dark like every other object in a sleeping house. It did not need to remain illuminated to be true. At the bottom step, she reached back for my hand. I took it. The first public image of our marriage had shown an empty space where I belonged. The last one did not center us at all. It held a hotel staff, a finished arch, 2 removed chairs, and every person who had chosen to move closer before the shutter. That was the photograph we kept downstairs.